All right, so now that we have the mines laid out, now we need to worry about the whole part where when we click on something, we actually get it to clear out whatever is there. So at the moment, we have an action performed event, which has a reset button, which currently does nothing, and a loop that just basically, well, a pair of for loops where it goes through each of the buttons and checks to find the one that we want, and then sets its text to those counts. That's actually pretty good. The only other thing we should probably do is we should probably disable that button so we can't click on it again. So buttons x, y, dot set enabled to false. So now when we actually click on it, we can't click on it again. Oh, clever. Landed on a mine right away. Anyway, so that brings up the interesting thing of what about if you click on a mine? So I should probably have something here that's special about that. So if counts x, y is a mine, I'm going to have a special section of code here. Otherwise, carry on. And we're going to have a special thing here also if the count is 0. So let's see, if counts as a mine, what we should probably do is we're not going to take the 10 and display it. That's a special value. What I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to set the color to red and just put in maybe a circle or something, maybe an X. Probably an X is a good way to do it. So I'm going to say buttons x, y dot set foreground. Yes, foreground. So I'm going to set that to red, and then I'm going to import color because it's complaining about that. And then buttons x, y dot set text to be an X. Okay, so now there's something I should do here where I actually clear out all of the different things that were marked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually call a separate method whose job it is basically to go through every single one of the buttons and anything that's basically set all of their text to be the count unless they're mine and then show them as X's. I think that I'm not going to I think I'm just going to leave the one they clicked on as red and leave the rest of them as black. So let me go ahead and make another method here. Public void, let's see, something having to do with losing the game. Lost game. Okay, so I need to go through and basically walk through everything in the grid. So let's do a for loop. From buttons.length to that, and another for loop, which is y, which is going to go through buttons 0.length. All right, so there's an unfortunate thing that you cannot check to see if well, maybe you can. Let's check. I was going to say that you can't check to see if something is enabled. Oh, you can. Okay, never mind. Well, that was easy. You cannot say get enabled. You have to say is enabled. So one of the weird things is that there's often a series of getters, which are Boolean values, which usually use the prefix is, so is enabled. Even though get enabled probably is a better way to say it. So if it's enabled, we're going to need to do something. Okay, so if it is not a mine, then we're just going to set it to be the number. So if counts x, y is not equal to a mine, then we're just going to set the text on the button. To counts x, y. And we want to set that to string. Ta-da. Okay, so the other thing I should do is I should disable this. Okay, so now that's disabled. Now if it's a mine, all I'm going to do is, actually I don't need another if statement, I can just say else here, because if it's not a number and it's not a mine, something has gone seriously wrong. So I should say buttons x, y dot set text to be an x. Buttons x, y dot set enabled to false. Now, one other thing I should do down here, I set this to red. Now by default, after that happens, everything else is drawn in red as well. So I actually need to reset the color back to black in order to get back to the default state. As it draws things, it actually sets whatever the color is of the thing it's going to draw in, the pixel colors, draws the thing, and then you have to reset it. Actually, that's not entirely true, but on buttons. That's actually true when you're drawing painting methods. Let's check this out. So if I do click, hey look, I hit an X right away. I should actually call this lost game if I do hit an X. All right, so if I do hit an X, so there we go. Looks like when you disable a button, it clears out the foreground color. Okay, so that's reasonable. So now I need to get this reset to work. So reset, what I'm going to have to do is go through all of the buttons and reset them to be enabled. And then I should call create random mines again. Now, I suppose one thing I could do by default is actually go through and set up the create random mines to also have the re-enabling, but maybe I don't want to do that. There's a couple different ways you can do it, just like everything else. So now I'm going to take buttons length, buttons 0 length, and each of these buttons I'm going to re-enable. And after that, I'm going to call, after those two for loops, I'm going to call my create random mines. Is that how I named it? Looks like it. Boy, bad luck. Oh, I need to set the text back to blank too, don't I? So set enabled. There we go. So clear it out, reset. If I click here again, okay, it's different. Good. Okay, so the last thing that I'd like to do is, I'd like to make it that when you click on a 0, you clear out every 0 that's attached to it as well. And I'm actually going to create a recursive way of doing this, which means I'm going to have a method that calls itself, a little bit like our print prefix and print postfix from earlier project. So, clear zeros. All right, so when I click on a 0, I'm going to want to go through each of those zeros and clear out their neighbors, and then go through each of those zeros and clear out their neighbors, and so on. Now there is an issue here that if I have two zeros right next to each other, I don't want them to go back and forth clearing each other out over and over again. That would be an infinite loop, and that would be bad. So I need to make sure that there's some way I can make sure that I stop clearing out zeros eventually. One way to do this is if I disable buttons as I go, then I can make sure that I don't try and redo a disabled button. The other thing I have to do is I have to keep a list of all the possible things that I need to clear out. So I'm actually going to have to somehow pass a list around as to all the things that are in here. So I think I'm going to have an array list of, boy, how am I want to do this? Buttons, maybe? I need the X and Y position, so let's actually pass around integers. And I'm going to use the same trick I used earlier with the X and Y of putting both of them into the same number. To clear. So if clear.size is 0, We're done, and we return. Otherwise, we're going to grab out this particular integer from toClear, and I need an x and a y position. So this is going to be toClear.get. So I'm just going to grab the first thing out of the list, and it's going to be divided by 100. And y is going to be toClear.get0 mod 100, so the remainder. And then I'm going to remove 0. So that is going to get me the x and y of a particular square.